네, 그러면 두 번째 분야인 에너지 저장 장치에 대해서 IHS 리서치의 프랭크 지에 시니어 애널리스트님께서 발표를 해 주시겠습니다. 발표 주제는 그리드 커넥티드 에너지 저장 시장의 미래에 대해서 진행하겠습니다. 프랭지에 지에 애널리스트님은 태양전지 산업의 전문가로 활동을 하셨고 2013년부터 그리드 커넥티드 에너지 저장 장치를 연구를 하고 계십니다. 프랭크 지에 애널리스트님을 큰 박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
So, actually, I heard of people talking about China multiple times this morning, and even till just now, and Brett has introduced China several times. So, before I start, maybe a few words about myself. Actually, I look very young, and actually, I'm not so young. Okay, I'm from Shanghai, China, and I actually have been in the consulting industry or market research industry for 8 years now. So, I've been working for Frost & Sullivan as Andrew Lee for 5 years. And now I've been staying with IHS. IHS actually is a company based in Denver, California of US. So I've been working with IHS for 3 years now. My major responsibility is PV inverters, the balance of systems, and lately, the energy storage system. So today, I'm very glad that the organizer invited us to share our experience with all the audiences. So, hopefully you are not getting sleepy after a very long presentation period. So what I will do is I will not show you a lot of the figures. Instead of, I will show you some of the charts and explain the methodology and the logic underlies. So first of all, before I introduce IHS, can I ask those heard of IHS, please raise up your hand. How many of you heard of IHS? Well, surprised a little. Anyway, so I'm glad that IHS is getting some kind of momentum or kind of brand awareness in Korea. But still, a few words about IHS for those who have not heard of IHS. So, for your understanding, IHS is just a U.S. company which is established actually in Denver of the California state. And now we have actually 8,000 employees worldwide. And our global offices is actually everywhere in the 4 continents. So far, we have so many clients. I won't read these figures one by one, but one thing to remember is that IHS stands for Information Handling System. So that's my current company name. So today's I come to the Smart Grid Week of Korea. It's the first time for me to go to Seoul. Actually, yesterday it's a nightmare for me because I recognize 0 character in Korean language. And I still managed to get from the Gimpo airport to the Intercontinental Hotel. And some very kind people helped me. So my feeling is that the country of Korea is very friendly country, although it is a small one. So my feeling is that this small country is now facing a very important period of finding its way of future development for the smart grid. And this morning I heard some gentleman, Wu Han Wang, talking about the smart grid development in Korea. It's very to my excitement. So what I will talk about is more specifically on the energy storage itself. So I suppose people here have heard of energy storage. My presentation will be basically answering the 4 questions. First question, I will answer question, what is the current status of the energy storage market in the world market? And what will it look like in the future? The second question, of course, I will deal with the technology branch because we have so many batteries and what will be the mainstream in next 4 to 5 years' time. And thirdly, I will talk to you the key market segments and regions for energy storage, which means the downstream market. Just to try to slow down a little bit. So the last but not the least, I will talk about the technology mainstream and the price trend for the master dream of the energy batteries. So, to begin with, we'll take a look at the current classification under IHS framework. Actually, as you can see from the slides, IHS classifies the energy storage market downstream into 4 segments. The first segment and the largest one is called behind the meter. And behind the meter is actually combining what you call the home energy management system, and also you apply that for also the commercial sector. So this one really means end user side. This is the largest market because this slide actually is a 2017 forecast. And to give you some basic idea about how large the market is, the global market for energy storage, according to IHS in 2014, is just 1.5 billion USD. However, the market will grow to over 9.7 billion USD in 2017, which is about nearly 5 times growth. We call that market a very big one in 2017. And I remember some of the colleagues, some of the friends asked me, when do IHS think the market will actually grow? And that is our current answer. So after the behind-the-meter segment, here comes the in-the-grid sector. This sector actually is very closely related to what we call the smart grid. Because in the grid is a situation where you have the energy storage system that is connected to the grid. So this one is forecast to become the second largest one in the year 2020. But so far, it's not so large. And we also have 2 other sectors, which is also called co-located with renewables and co-located with conventional generators. And I still would like to recite the gentleman's speech this morning about the smart grid in Korea. And you have a plan to build 500 megawatt of energy storage system with the coal-burning firepower, right, by 2017 or 2020. So that's a Korean plan. So we classify that as co-located with conventional generator, like the coal-fire plant. However, this one refers to the wind and solar sector, because both in the US and in China and in Japan, we have seen cases like that. There are energy storage systems co-located with the PV farms and also the wind farms. That purpose is actually very, very clear. So after we see all of this, I would not touch too deep into this because we have another slide talking about that in much more detail. So we took a look at how the market will be and what is the underlying reason for energy storage to become a hot topic. And to begin with, actually, there are several pies, but I will tell you the story about the electricity as a very important part of energy. Because we all know that energy forms are very big part of our life nowadays. We have oil, we have gas, we have the coal, and we also have nuclear. So actually, it is to our interesting point that we realize in 2014, in the United States, nearly 1/4 of the energy is consisted of the electricity itself, other than the fuels, other than the petrols and the gas. So in other developing areas and the less developing areas, we can also find a similar situation. That is, energy delivered as electricity, actually, the percentage is actually about a minor portion. However, as time goes by, in 20 years' time, this percentage of electricity in total energy will grow, exceeding 1/4 in US, and in India is nearly 1/4. Even in countries, in regions like Africa, there will be over 10% coming from electricity. So this brings a very interesting question. What is the main forms of energy within this electricity? How is the renewable and how is the traditional? So we take a look at all of the regions in the world, and actually it's very funny that we realize it's not to do with economies. It's some general trend happening in the world that the renewable energy transformation is happening nowadays. And this chart shows 2014 comparison with 2030, our forecast. So I will take Europe and I will take Latin America as 2 examples. So for the countries in Europe, I would like to mention Germany and a country like UK as examples, because we all know that this yellow part resembles what we call wind and solar energy. Even in the year 2014, that consists of only 10% in the entire territory of European continent. However, we see that portion as expectedly high, extremely high in Germany, because Germany have been installing solar system for over 8 years now. So actually, which means the penetration rate in Germany can be extremely higher than other regions in Europe area. And this caused one of the problems. What is the problem? So solar system is just the time-dependent system. During daytime, we have solar power, but at nighttime, we don't have any power. So in this launch, I talked to this question with Mr. Castrini, and actually it is a matter of maintaining some traditional power plant to fill in the gap that is generated by the PV farm system. So this is becoming one of the serious issues of the grid in Germany. And actually, in countries like Latin America, very interesting, because we noticed that in 2014, only 2% comes from the renewable energy sector. And countries like Chile and Brazil, they actually have very large pipelines, because IHS have noticed that in Chile, the pipeline for solar PV plants is actually over 1 gigawatt, which is 1,000 megawatt, by the year of 2014. However, guess how many have been implemented so far? Who can have a guess? How many have been installed in Chile so far? Maybe Mr. Castrini? You have a guess? No, bigger than 2. Anyway. Okay, the real number is 100 megawatt being installed. That's 1 out of the 10 part of the total pipeline of 1 gigawatt. Only 100. So the major reason for that is countries in Latin America like Chile, they do not have very systematic support for the solar development. They have a pipeline, but the government, they actually don't have any kind of subsidiary policy or encourage the industry to join the industry. So what we see is a 2% in 2014. However, this percentage will actually grow significantly by the year 2030, because actually we have talked about a lot. The energy has becoming a very serious issue, and renewable energy is actually one of the solutions. So we see that as one of the ones. So as time goes by, renewable energy will become a very significant portion, is especially more important in this energy consumption. So how will we solve the problem? Like, we have energy at daytime, but we have no input at all at nighttime. So energy storage, that's a problem. That's a solution I'd like to bring. So here we summarize is how energy storage will help us to solve the problem of this kind of unbalanced supply and demand, also sometimes the voltage surge. That I will not talk it one by one, but just I'd like to mention, as I said, behind the meter application is currently the mainstream in 2014. So they function like backup power supply, which you can use at blackouts. This is very useful for countries like India, because we know the energy storage, the power supply in India is not stable at all. So there can be blackouts from time to time. Very useful. And for this second one, it means on-site energy use management, which means you can actually store the energy generated during daytime and use that at nighttime. This is very useful if you are an office goer and you have some kind of PV system on your rooftop. You will be able to use that if you have an energy storage system. However, if you don't, your energy is just wasted, or you can sell it to the grid. So the third one is called what we call ancillary services. This is what we call a balance of supply and demand. Especially makes sense when the grid company requires the user to have their own mechanism to adjust the supply and demand of this kind of electricity from PV power system. So in the future, we do see a very significant growth in this sector, which is transmission and distribution update deferral. And I would not mention this in much detail. It's just something to do with the grid company. They have the energy storage as of some very fast responsive mechanisms, as Brett mentioned just now. So the key applications for energy storage, I'll talk about that. So this one actually is the biggest sector for residential and the commercial. We all know that the Germany countries and the US countries, they are actually encouraging the users to use the power by themselves. But as a question I mentioned, in daytime you are going to the office. You don't have the chance to use your power from the PV system. How do you solve that? So energy storage can serve as a purpose in the behind the meter. And second one, as I mentioned, the second largest one in the grid. And we have so many cases because you mentioned China. So actually, for China's circumstances, we have 2 demonstration projects in north and the south part of China. One is in Hubei province, Hebei province, which is very near to Beijing, which is a 20 megawatt solar plant with 10 megawatt hours, the energy storage sites in 2 phases. Another one is in southern province of Guangdong, where we have a much smaller size of the pilot demonstration projects. I see those demonstration projects as very small in its size in recent years. However, this will definitely grow as China is actually putting a lot of emphasis on the development of a smart grid. So the rest of the two, there's one I'd like to mention that they're co-located with renewables. This sector sometimes has its overlap or have conflict with integrate. For example, I mentioned there's one demonstration projects in northern part of China who served the grid company. In the meantime, it also served the wind and the solar farms. So you can say that as combination. But actually, IHS sees they co-located with renewables. This sector will not be a major growth point in the next 5 years' time. It will gradually, the percentage will drop. Simply because people all know that renewable energy, just for your background, they have very high upfront cost and maintenance cost. So to balance that, it's just a matter of how you operate the system, not how you just store the energy and then transfer that to the grid. So that adds up to the power plant cost of the renewable ones. So this will not be a mainstream in the future. This one actually is the last one I mentioned, with conventional power plants. It goes with a coal, with a nuclear, with whatever. The most major function is that black start, or what we call the low time start. It can overcome this issue quite smoothly. So what I know of a case of BYD, a Chinese company, who have tried to establish a 2 megawatt lithium-ion energy storage project along with one of the nuclear plants in Guangdong province. And this project has nearly been finished. So this is another incidence after the Fukushima crisis, provides a security guarantee for this kind of system. So let's take a look at the major countries who deploys the energy storage. Actually, as we can see, USA and Germany have been the 2 countries with most activities for energy storages. I will not go into deep, but Japan is some kind of a special case because we all know that Japanese companies are offering a system called Home Energy Management System, initialed HEMS, especially for the solar industry. However, we all know that Japan is actually a small country with very big pipeline because this noon during lunch, I talked with Mr. Castrini and we realized Japan is actually so far the 2nd largest world with PV installations, just after China. So this is amazing news. However, to my concern is that Japan is a small country. How come it has so much land to support this kind of ground mount system? So here comes the answer. Japan is actually trying to debut the energy storage to support the residential users and commercial users. They can use their power in daytime, store that, and also what you call load shift, peak hours and the off-peak hours. So other countries are more like in the R&D and the test piloting installations. Countries like China, I mentioned, UK, and actually India, Australia, they're testing out the projects. They're trying to see how much the cost is to determine how much support they give this kind of new kind of market mechanism. So let's take a look at the major barriers for the energy storage to enter the market. As we all see that the batteries are one of the fundamental cost of the system. So the first problem is the cost. The high price of batteries, the red one. This is a fundamental one. However, IHS would see that as decreasing very fast, especially for lithium-ion batteries. And we do know some situation where countries do not have a legal position for the energy storage. By legal position, I mean they don't have some kind of policy or laws which said what kind of functions energy storage will play in an entire system of energy supply. So this will need to be tackled. And second one is actually, we all know that only Germany and countries like Japan and USA, in some states, they have some incentive policies for the grid, for the users to use the energy storage. But we will see more policies being introduced to this segment. So next, I would like to take you to look at the technologies of the energy storage. So just for your information, IHS do not include this kind of traditional ones like the flywheel and compressed air in our study. We have actually studied intensively mostly the chemical and physical types of batteries. So actually, we list out 5 types of the energy storage systems, technologies, and of them, I would like to talk about lithium ion, the sodium sulfur, and also the advanced lead acid. So actually, lead acid has been a very traditional technology. It's very mature. So from this chart, you can see this green part resembles very strong advantage. And the second part, if it becomes red, that means it's not so strong, or it is disadvantage. Let's take lead acid, for example. Lead acid, actually, they have very short lifetime, very disadvantaged lifetime cost, because we all know that recycling for the lead acid battery is very short. 3 years or 5 years, you have to replace that. However, in the future, the price for that will decline slowly, not as we expected. The stars really goes to lithium-ion batteries. These batteries, they have very high energy storage density. And also, in the future, we forecast the price decline will happen very fast. So far, we see a 10% decline every year for the lithium-ion battery price in the world market. And to say a little more about safety concerns, because we all heard of the lithium-ion battery on fire on your smartphone. When it's charging and you're using it, it bursts out, it floats. So there is some concern about the safety about lithium-ion. So this is one of the questions for the lithium-ion industry to solve. But there is also another type of technology maybe you have not heard of. That is the sodium sulfur. There's one Japanese company called NGK who is providing the sodium sulfur technology. And there's one research institute in China who has bought the technology already and doing some kind of pilot study. However, the sodium sulfur, so far, only one supplier in the world. So the price is very high. And in the future, we do not see very sharp drop of the price. It has very serious safety concerns because sodium sulfur system, you need some kind of cooling system to keep its temperature on the normal range. So, sodium sulfur, the kind of battery, is limited. In the future, we do see lithium ion in the next 3 to 5 years' time becoming more majority in the technology, in the energy storage. So, with this slide, I would like to take you to look at the price concerns of the technologies. I just mentioned that the lithium-ion battery has highest price. And this one resembles lithium-ion battery. And if you ask me which is a mainstream technology in 5 years' time, I would say lithium-ion. Lead acid will not phase out because it's advanced, it's mature, provides a low upfront cost. However, in the next 5 years' time, I'd like to especially mention to you, flow battery will become a mainstream in especially the inner grid applications, because they are easy to apply, this part. Easy to apply, and maintenance doesn't requires a lot of inputs. So these slides check with you the technologies in terms of percentage. And if you are careful enough, you can notice that the lead acid battery technologies are actually have been a majority of the technology of energy storage in 2013. The fundamental reason because of the price. The price is low, affordable to be applied. However, lead acid battery has its environmental concerns because of the very short lifetime of the battery. So, which means after 3 to 5 years' time, you have to replace the battery which is very high. So we do see the percentage of the lead acid battery to increase in the next 2 years' time, because this technology is developing very fast, and they have the highest density of energy, and the depth of charge is very good. Most of the time, the battery systems made of lithium ion provides a very, very much multiple functions that serve the purpose, not only for residential users, but also for the grid. So we see this grow. However, for the years since 2016 onwards, as I mentioned, flow battery, this part, the orange one, will grow significantly, because we do see the grid companies of each country have some kind of impact needs to repair the grid parities, to repair the supply and demand gaps. So they deploy this kind of flow battery systems, just in case, to help the grid to realize more stable development. So here is one of the chart. We see the installations by the kind of nameplate installation. And as you can see from the chart, before the year 2014, the market is quite small. Even by the year 2014, the installation size adds up to less than 1 gigawatt in the global market. And actually, we do see this market grow tremendously in the next 5 years' time. Actually, by the year 2017, in the grid market and the behind-the-meter market will become the two of the largest in the world. And actually, the market size is going to be growing to about over 6 gigawatt in 2017. And we see large growth from these sectors. So this is about the last but least slides of my presentation. And in the future, as we talk about the markets already, Germany and the USA being the primary ones in the world market. But in the future, which market will be this kind of major application markets for energy storage? With a steady drop of the energy storage system price, we do see an evenly split market in 2020, in actually about 10 years' time. So regions like the Americas will have much market share. However, this kind of market like EMEA, they will have kind of about 1/3 of the market share, because most of the growth will come in from other countries other than Germany and Italy. And this region is not worth mentioning. Asia countries like Japan, China, and I heard of Australia also have very important market in the energy storage sector. So we bear in mind that the markets will develop much evenly in 10 years' time. So to wrap up my presentation, there are some takeaways for the audience. Actually, we see the major reason for people to introduce the smart grid and to introduce the energy storage is that there's some kind of increasing imbalance between supply and demand in electricity. We have to introduce energy storage as a solution to balance supply and demand. A second point is actually energy storage, its key functioning is having as a backup power, and also kind of deferrals in T&D. So the third part is actually, we mentioned that the price for lithium-ion battery will decrease faster than the lead acid, which will be becoming a mainstream in the next 3 to 5 years' time. And lastly, but not the least, we also mentioned that the annual installation for new energy storage systems will reach 6 gigawatt in 2017, which will be a fundamental market in the future. So with this said, I have concluded my presentation, and if you feel like, you can contact me by both the email or by